thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green. We appreciate you joining us today. We want you to visit online as well at wallbuilderslive.com and wallbuilders.com. A wealth of information at both of those websites. And at wallbuilderslive.com, you can also get archives of our programs over the last few months, especially those Fridays where you get some of that good news on Good News Friday. And you can also get a wealth of information there at wallbuilders.com. Books, DVDs, CDs, all kinds of great things there. Articles you can download right now and read on different topics that apply to today. It's all about going back and finding out what history and what the Bible tell us about the issues that we're facing in our culture today. We'd also like to get your questions. You can email those questions into radio@wallbuilders.com. You might have a topic you'd like us to cover or a question about a particular person in our history or a founding document, one of those things. We'd love to hear from you and try to cover that topic as well. This is a very special week. It's Thanksgiving, and you can actually get some articles about Thanksgiving by David Barton right there on our website at wallbuilders.com. It's such a good time for us to remember our history and what the true foundation of our nation was really all about. We've lost so much of that in our history. Unfortunately, God has placed people in positions where they've been able to capture that history and bring it back to life for us. And one of those guys is out of Plymouth, Massachusetts, just an amazing guy, and we're thrilled to have him with us today on WallBuilders Live. Dr. Paul Jehle is the Plymouth Rock Foundation's executive director. He's been doing this for 35 years, has really brought to light to our generation the truth about the Pilgrims and really the foundation of our nation and this continent from long before. Dr. Paul Jehle, we are thrilled to have you with us. Thanks for coming on, sir.
Listen, great to be with you here, and always great to talk about the first Thanksgiving and the Pilgrims.
Well, we were honored to have you at Patriot Academy this year. We love having you on the program. You're such a great teacher, and you have a wealth of information. And I got to ask you, just, this week being Thanksgiving, and you having done this as long as you have, what's the one thing that you think people need to know about Thanksgiving that has really been twisted or warped, or maybe they just completely forgotten?
I think most people have forgotten the fact that Pilgrims came over as a church. It was a church migration project, and therefore it was very natural for them to thank God for their blessings. They didn't think the source came from the earth. They didn't think it came from just other people. And they thank God. And I think that as Americans, we need to stop and ponder and say, where did this freedom come from? How come we are so unique? How come less than 5% of the world through history has ever experienced freedom, and we've taken it for granted? I think we need to go back to thanking God, the source of our liberty. And I think when you think of the Pilgrims, that's a microcosm, you see, of that happening. Because, of course, they weren't the first people to thank God for blessings or even have a Thanksgiving, but here in America, it was very unique. And that's, I think, where we need to come back to and remind ourselves, look, these blessings came from God. They didn't come from our own hand.
You said church migration. That's certainly been lost. I mean, we don't think of them that way. Typically, most people, I'm sure, they wonder if they were coming for business, were they running from prison, what were they really here for? So even that in and of itself is new information for most people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, their church had grown to about 350 in Leiden, Holland, and you think about it, only about 75 ended up coming here to the New World. And so you recognize that when that happened, you have a small percentage of a church you're sending out into a wilderness, as one historian put it, choice grain into the wilderness. And there you're seeing, and my wife and I have sometimes pondered this, who in our church would we send? We would probably want to send the people with the best character. And then again, those who are characters, maybe we should send them. So the idea is, people don't realize that on that boat on the Mayflower, there may have been 30 strangers to the Church of Leiden. That didn't mean they were all strangers to the faith, and then about 75 that were, members of the Church of Leiden. So this was a church migration project, and this was a church planting mission. But then out from this because they took those same principles that they used for their church covenant and then extended it to the Mayflower Compact, their civil covenant, and then eventually their Constitution in 1636. You have that same faith extended into the freedoms and the jurisdictions of life, and you have the seed of a nation coming forth. And again, the Pilgrims weren't the only ones. You had the folks in Jamestown. You had others that would contribute to this at a national level, but it's quite a seed when you think about it, that here are these individuals fleeing some persecution. They had religious liberty in Holland, but they really recognized that with the Truce of Spain ending in 1620, their children growing older as well as themselves, that now was the time. And so they took this massive step of faith. And that's why emphasizing the faith of the Pilgrims is historically accurate. Because without that faith, they never would have come.
And you mentioned that this wasn't the first time that they would have thanked God, not just on Thanksgiving. I mean, we have the painting, of course, at the Capitol that people that do the tour there get exposed to, of them praying and reading the Bible before they even embark there. But what about that? I mean, in terms of it being something that they did from the beginning when they landed here.
Oh, there's no question. In fact, their whole idea was that the Bible was the Word of God, and that Jesus Christ was the only mediator between God and man, and it was their heart blood. It was exactly who they were. And because of this, their faith emphasized and was practiced at every level. So they would pray. They would have solemn assemblies. They would have Thanksgiving days. In fact, there was a tradition that got started here in America, of course, from the Pilgrims and Puritans, where you would have a fast day called in the spring and then a Thanksgiving day called in the fall to thank God for the prayers you had offered in the spring. And, of course, the first Thanksgiving we know as the Pilgrims, was a third kind of event, and that was a celebration, 3-day celebration for the Pilgrims of feasting, not fasting. And where did they get this? Well, this comes from the Harvest Festival in England, which can be traced back to the Feast of Tabernacles in the Bible. And so this was a rejoicing time. So everything the Pilgrims did was centered around their faith. Nothing was secular to them. And so that's the kind of thing that we have to make sure we remind ourselves.
Our guest is Dr. Paul Jehle. When we come back, Dr. Jehle, let's talk about how that developed into a holiday here and whether we still celebrate it the way that the Pilgrims did and the way that many of our founding fathers did as well. Dr. Jehle, what's a website we can send people to learn more about you and your ministry?
Well, they can do it to plymrock.org. That's plymrock.org. That's the Plymouth Rock Foundation. And, of course, our big Thanksgiving celebration, which can be seen live streamed on the Internet, that's usathanksgiving.com.
Stay with us, folks. We'll be back in a moment on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. At the time of the American Revolution, numerous other nations also had revolutions, yet 200 years later, America is the only of those nations still under its original form of government. Is this just good luck? Not according to founding father Benjamin Rush. He declared, "I do not believe that the Constitution was the offspring of inspiration, but I am as perfectly satisfied that it is as much the work of a divine providence as any of the miracles recorded in the Old and New Testament." George Washington agreed. In fact, he declared, "I should be pained to believe that the United States have forgotten that divine interposition which was so often manifested during our Revolution, or that they fail to consider the omnipotence of that God who is alone able to protect them. Our founders acknowledged that our national success had come from God."
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Dr. Paul Jehle with us. We're talking about Thanksgiving and a special time this week. But is it the same type of celebration, Dr. Jehle, that it was intended to be and the tradition that it was for so many years here in America? Has Thanksgiving changed in America today?
Well, I think, first of all, there are some things that we can still see all the way back. I mean, people say today, oh, Thanksgiving, that's the time when we watch a lot of football. Well, you know, there was a lot of recreation games during those first Thanksgivings, so we can redeem part of that. Also, people would say, gee, I eat so much. Well, yeah, it was feasting also. But the areas that probably have grown a bit dim to Americans is this consciousness of thanking God for whatever you have as provisions and being grateful and content to have that. spending time. I know with our own Thanksgiving, when our relatives get together, I might read some of Bradford's history. I might read some paragraph from the Bible to say, look, let's thank God because whatever we have comes from the hand of God. And it may not always be so plentiful as the Pilgrims understood. And they recognized they had that first Thanksgiving in probably October 1621. But you know what? There were future years, like the next year, particularly 1622, they didn't even hardly have any food at all. So they were almost starving. And so they recognized, and yet they still thanked God. They didn't have the 3-day feast, but they were constantly reminding themselves of the need to thank God for all, what you have, and even difficulties. So this becomes something that I think is the most glaring missing ingredient that we can see in American society today, that we don't take the time, and publicly we don't often thank God. I mean, this was a public thing. This was when there was a Thanksgiving, it was done by the governor. It was a public proclamation. And so this is the kind of thing that we often don't see any longer in America, and yet we need to pray it gets restored.
Yeah, it seems like we're missing two things there. First, just personally, a heart of gratitude about what we have, whether it's a lot or a little, just being thankful for what we do have. And then secondly, corporately as a country or as a state or as a community, coming together and thanking God. I think David's got something like 1,400 public prayer proclamations of governors and presidents calling upon God. It does seem like we've gotten away from that. It's almost taboo now to acknowledge God's role in our blessings and in our provisions.
Yeah, and just think about that first Thanksgiving as to why that's so apparent. You know, all the dishes were wooden. You know, there were only 4 adult Pilgrim women left alive after the first winter, and yet they served 140 guests. You think about that. 140 people. The guests, of course, were about 90 of the native peoples who came, and they did this. And of course, it's thankful that when you're going to have all those guests, it's a great thing that the natives brought most of the food, and they brought the deer and they brought the wild turkeys and whatnot. But the idea, and of course, then we have the recreation and all. But there was this thanking of God for that provision, and thanking of God that they had a peace treaty. And we think of this. We think of the harmony with all the difficulties we still have in this nation, and that we see on our newspaper, the harmony by which we still get along in communities still can be attributed to that idea of voluntary association and covenanting, which we get from the Bible. To think of the best, to draw out the best in your neighbor, to join together to do what is right. Those all things come back from that model of that first Thanksgiving that we can thank God for here in America.
You know, you've mentioned several times the seeds that were planted and some of the things that we experience today, even in our form of government and our economics and all these things that came from the Pilgrims that were planted by them. Dr. Jehle, you're not only an expert on the Pilgrims, you're a constitutional scholar. When we come back from the break, I want to ask you about those seeds and the form of government that we have and what those guys gave us from the very beginning. And let's talk a little bit about the economics and how they started with socialism and moved towards free enterprise and private property. Give us a little bit of that transformation and how they found that in the Bible. Dr. Paul Jehle is our guest. Stay with us, folks. We're on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. In the case Abingdon versus Shemp, the Supreme Court ruled that the Bible could no longer be an independent textbook in public school curriculum. Would our founding fathers have agreed? Benjamin Rush certainly would have disagreed. Benjamin Rush was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he was a leading educator of the day. In fact, he was the first founding father to call for free public schools. Benjamin Rush declared, "The great enemy of the salvation of man, in my opinion, never invented a more effective means of extinguishing Christianity from the world than by persuading mankind that it was improper to read the Bible at schools. The Bible should be read in our schools in preference to all other books." In the view of founding father Benjamin Rush, the Bible was the textbook of preference for public schools.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Dr. Paul Jehle with us today. And Dr. Jehle, we were talking before we go to the break about the influence these guys had on our Constitution, on our founding principles that we love today, maybe some of which we're moving away from. But how did they start? I mean, I always hear and have even talked about how they tended to have a socialist beginning, but then because of biblical influence, moved towards free enterprise. What have you found in that?
Well, obviously, when the Pilgrims first came, they were following the Scriptures. But you have to realize, since they're children of the Reformation, the Bible has only been in the hand of the individual for more than 100 years. And when that was the case, the limited access to the Bible caused individuals to not be searching in its principles. But then once you have it, you begin to search it. And over a period of 100 years, they began to develop concepts and ideas of liberty, of jurisdictional separation of church and state, economic freedom, all these kinds of things. So in England, at the time the Pilgrims left, socialism was the established practice of the economy. In fact, the local authorities, the civil authorities, set your wages. You didn't just have a minimum wage law, you had a wage law. You had a specific set. This is what you're going to get paid if you're a blacksmith. This is what you're going to get paid if you work with horses and whatever it happens to be. And therefore, this idea of setting your own prices and wages for employers and having free enterprise was unknown. So when the Pilgrims came here, their contract for finances to pay back their bonds were set with them from a socialist concept. But, of course, 3 years into this, they were starving, and Bradford recognized, listen, I just we have to make a change. And, of course, what they did was go to private ownership of land and private ownership of labor. And when that happened, they planted 3 times the amount of produce that first year when they went to private enterprise. Interestingly enough, they never had a problem since that time of productivity and wealth, because now they had more to give to other people. And that idea of private welfare and private charity was begun right here. So the Pilgrims did that, and that's 100 years before the Puritans would eventually. The Puritans never adopted free enterprise principles till the early 1700s, even though many of their businesses went out of business because there was no profit margin, because the state was setting the wages and the prices. So you have a very interesting study in economics when you deal with the Pilgrims, but also other areas. And that was not lost on our founding generation. When you read the colonial clergy's sermons of the 1740s and 50s during the Great Awakening, and later on, you see them dipping back into the Pilgrims, the idea of the Puritans when they first came, being a city set on a hill. You find them using that. You find them constantly referring to Israel, ancient Israelite government, as the model for America. And this idea of church and state being under God, but yet separate in their jurisdictions, all the things that we think sometimes just appeared at the time of the Constitution. Not so. It was consecutively done, generation to generation, accumulated, and become clearer and clearer. So they burst through the soil, so to speak, as a flowering plant in 1789, when actually it had been planted many generations before. And I think Americans need to see this, that you have the seed. Even the simple fact of writing the Mayflower Compact, a charter that defines where your rights come from, and then writing the bylaws, their Constitution, 16 years later in 1636. Every edition of the Pilgrim Laws always went back to the Mayflower Compact as its preamble, or the base on which it sits, much like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were designed to do. And so you see this model coming from the Pilgrims that's practiced later among the founding period.
They tripled their output once they had freedom.
And most people would say, gee, could we use a tripling of our output?
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, I guess that's why history is so important. I mean, if we go back, nothing's new under the sun, and we've tried all these socialistic experiments in the past and seen that they've failed. And when we've tried freedom, as Bob McEwen says, it only works every time it's tried. But what a great example that they tripled, and it's just that there's such great influence there that we've lost. It's why we love what you do and how you bring it to life, and so many people need to hear these messages. And by the way, you spoke at Patriot Academy about the remnant that planted these seeds in our nation, and the need for every generation to have that remnant. Talks like that. Can folks get CDs of your presentations online?
Oh, sure can, and they can even get on that. Plymouth Rock Foundation website, plymrock, plymrock.org. They can also get my classes at the high school level. I mean, on economics, on foreign policy, constitutional law, and they can go right to that website and bookstore and begin to get those lectures on various topics.
Well, folks, I would encourage you to check it out. Go to the website and check it out, or maybe listen to some of the things online that you can share with your families. One more break. We'll be right back with Dr. Paul Jehle here on WallBuilders Live.
Hey guys, this is Tim Barton with WallBuilders, and I know you hear my dad and Rick talk a lot about our founding fathers, about the original intent of our nation, the constitutional heritage that we have, and really we've seen how far we've slipped away from that. And I know a lot of us, as we hear my dad and Rick talk, think, I wish there was a place that I could go and I could see these documents, and I could read and learn about the founding fathers firsthand, see the things they did. And I want to give you some websites today that can help you accomplish that very thing. If you get online, you can go to places like Library of Congress, and you can look under their Century of Lawmaking or historical documents. You can go to the Avalon Project, to the Founders Constitution, to Google Books, or even the Internet Archives, or you can just go to WallBuilders' website. We have a section for our library, and under that section we have different subgroups for historical documents, historical writings, even a place where you can get helpful links to find out more information about other websites where you can do research for yourself and find the truth for yourself. Friends, this is a time that we need to know who we are and where we came from. WallBuilders.com is a great place to go.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Dr. Paul Jehle, our guest, the website, plymrock.org. Go check it out. What a special week. And Dr. Jehle, a lot of exciting things coming up. You've got a huge celebration coming up in a few years for the 400th anniversary, but every year you guys do a big deal there that you're a part of organizing.
Yes, and that the idea of America's Hometown Thanksgiving celebration is drawing more than 200,000 people to Plymouth each year now. And this is a historic parade, chronologically written so that we devise a script for the media that deals with each century and Americana at its best, the ingenuity, and, of course, giving thanks to God for bringing that to America. And so it's a phenomenal time, and we're just gearing up for that right now, and it looks like it's going to be another very successful event.
You know, I'm one of the things we've talked about in the past that's so cool now. A lot of the things, historical sites and things in America's history have been so secularized. I mean, they just tended to whitewash anything out about God and the Bible. And it seems like God has just placed you for such a time as this with favor in that arena, in that area, where you're able to keep that true history there. What a blessing that God's been able to use you in that way.
Well, it comes from just serving people, and also we love our history. We give tours regularly 6 days a week here as well, and I think it's great. We were able to work with the other historians in town, the town of Plymouth itself. I think everybody's recognizing that this is a phenomenal place to remember where our freedoms came from and to thank God for all of our blessings. It's a time to be positive. I mean, we're negative enough. We see all the things that we don't like that are going on around the world and in our nation, and yet that's what Thanksgiving is. Let's pause. Let's thank God for the blessings we have. And so it's a great thing to do by putting it on center stage, honoring our military, to honor our heroes like we're doing this year, particularly right on through the actual EMTs and doctors that worked tirelessly at the Boston Marathon this year.
I so appreciate your attitude, Dr. Jehle. That's that Joshua Caleb attitude, not being depressed about the challenges we face, but celebrating the foundation that we have and the fact that truth is on our side. And our nation's had tough times in the past, and if we'll remember our history, like Josiah, go in and read those scrolls and find out who we really are, we can turn this thing around. There are a lot of bright spots out there, and as an educator, you get to see that when you see those eyes light up out in an audience. There's a lot of young people right now that are really grabbing onto these truths.
There's no question, and that's one of the things as we go into Thanksgiving that we can be thankful for, because the Pilgrims themselves, after the first winter, when half of their number died, they remarked and they understood that because more children survived in proportion than adults, they were here for the future, and that idea of youth is a very, very positive thing. It was very, very powerful for them, and that's why I think Thanksgiving is such a powerful time as well. We thank God for what He's done in the past, but also the fact that there's seeds for what He's going to do in the future.
Amen. All right, folks, we want to challenge you, encourage you, want you to get this information and share it with your friends and family and even online. Dr. Jehle, do you have any kind of like Facebook and that sort of thing, or email list where people can follow you?
Well, they can go right on online, and when they do that, we can get their emails and whatnot. But they can also watch the parade, on the Internet.
Oh, you can?
Oh, yes, and they can just go to PACTV.org, and when they do that, they will be able to see that parade. And I'll be on there giving historic commentary as the parade goes by.
Okay, so on the website you have an archive of the celebration where they can watch
That's right, and it's the local cable television station, pactv.org.
pactv.org. Fantastic. Dr. Jehle, God bless you, brother. We appreciate all that you're doing. Look forward to having you again, and look forward to you guys having a great celebration out there. Now, are there things that people can be doing to plan to come next year, since it's too late this year to actually get out there and join you? But if they wanted to come be a part of those 200,000 people that are coming out every year to join you, what would they do?
They certainly can. They can follow that website, usathanksgiving.com. They can contact us here at the Plymouth Rock Foundation. We've had families come from around the country, and they want to say, hey, what can we do? Some people have come in here and stayed even 3 weeks before the parade, helped to work on some of the floats.
Wow.
Or they can just come here and enjoy the day, the weekend festivities. No question about it. And we look forward to the centennial celebration of our national anthem.
All right, last thing before I let you go. As we mentioned, you're also a constitutional scholar. That's probably my favorite part about you. What about learning more about the Constitution and our history there? Where can they get more information from you on
Again,
that?
from Plymouth Rock Foundation, Plymrock, PLYMROCK.org. We have all kinds of information on the Constitution and courses as well.
Yeah, that was the hardest part for me when you came out to Patriot Academy, was choosing what to have you talk about. You got so many great topics and so much of a wealth of information there that we all need to be learning and educating and passing on to the next generation. Your blessing, sir. Thank you so much for coming on today.
All right, God bless you now.
Thanks for listening, folks. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green.
We stand undivided.